What up? Before we start the episode, there's a couple times that, the audio might spike or the video might lag. The Wi-Fi isn't too great at the academy sometimes, so just bear with us. We did a remote. Sometimes these things happen when you do a remote broadcast of any kind. So yeah, just bear with us. That being said, great episode with Joe Solecki. Hope you enjoy it, and roll the intro.
Okay, I figured out my key to success, now I'm locked in. I learned how to open doors like a locksmith. I'm uptown, I'm the one they wanna shop with. Run off with the bag, even though we don't shoplift. All that gun talk y'all want, I'm not with. It's not cool, everybody got them long clips. You gon' mess around and get one of your dogs hit. And when you do, I hope you know you're not John Wick.
Welcome back. You're now locked in with DK and Atwood. I'm Atwood. Killer to my left here, DK. Special guest today, UFC Lightweight. 13-4 total record, 5-2 in the UFC. Beat a legend in Jim Miller. He's fought Matt Wyman, Austin Hubbard. You might remember him from I think the latest season of The Ultimate Fighter with McGregor and Chandler. Beat De Silva. Got a big fight coming up with Grant Dawson. Killer, by the way. So I'm excited to see that one. Out of Jimmo, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Mr. Joe Solecki.
Yeah.
Appreciate you joining us, man.
What's up, guys? It's good to be on.
Yeah. So I've had the pleasure of talking to you once before, right before you went on to Dana White's Contender Series. That's how you got your, punched your ticket into the UFC. That's been what? Has it been 2 years?
How long? In July.
Holy
5
years. Dude,
Yeah.
It's been 5. That's been forever.
That's
wild.
insane. It's insane.
Yeah,
and
that
it's funny
is
because I'll have my pictures from there. It looks like your first day of high school versus your last day of your first day at your job. I got gray hair, all beat up, looking down. Oh man, you just like an avocado.
you got a beard. You got a beard now.
Yeah, trying. Shoot.
And I mean, you have a family now. You have 2 kids now, right?
Yeah. So we had no kids going into not the Ultimate Fighter. Thank God it was the Ultimate Fighter. Contender Series. And then I made the joke, and this is kind of crude, but in the cage at my debut, I was like, well, Casey's ovulating, I'm certain. Because we were always joking, once we get settled, if I can get a win and get a little security, we can start a family. And then if you trace it back, it's right about my debut. And then we had 9 months later, a baby came, was Nora, and now we have our son. Yeah. So a lot has changed in since I got to the UFC for sure.
Wow, man.
Well, let's start from the beginning with you. Tell us about how you found martial arts, what your first love in martial arts was.
Yeah. Well, so it started, I'm from New Jersey, so I was back there in South Jersey. My brother is a good bit older than me, 6 years, and he was playing baseball, and we moved town. So my parents would say oh, it's town politics that he wasn't playing, or they knew he was a third baseman. They put him in this position. I'm like, I always bust his balls. I just think he wasn't very good. But I was 4 and wanted to be a Power Ranger, so I wanted to do karate, the red and the green ranger. But Steve was kind of the guinea pig. So they sent him to karate, and that was in 97. And then by the time I started kindergarten, it was 99. So they didn't know any better. They got duped. My parents probably wouldn't have put me. I mean, they like martial arts, but they probably wouldn't have put us in, jiu-jitsu or wrestling or anything, because they didn't really want us playing hockey or football because of contact, So, but the instructor at the time, it's actually the guy that owns the Good Fight, Jim Fortunato. So he was the first instructor. He was going into Philly with my now, and we were kind of underneath John Hassett the whole time as an affiliation, but that's who my instructor became. But he was going into Philly with him at Steve Maxwell's Maxercise, the first Philly and South Jersey, and then North Jersey, you had the Henzo guys. So by the time I started, he got his blue belt, which, back then it's cool, I'm changing my whole school over. He only grandfathered my brother and those students into karate, and the rest of us were just thrown into jiu-jitsu. So my parents really didn't know the difference. You got a karate uniform on, you're still lining up, you're still doing all the discipline stuff. So, man, I used to call it coincidence. Now I'll say it's God's hands. I think it's what I'm supposed to do, but it was a crazy thing in that regard. But then, Jim Fortunato, the school kind of was dying out a little bit, and a lot of the programs had disappeared. And we had trained with his instructor, John Hassett, for a long time. He would come do seminars or, little in-house tournaments. And my parents really liked him. And I remember them always saying, he was really far. He was closer to the shore. And they're like, if he ever comes up this way, we would want you to be around him. We like him a lot. He's a good instructor. So by the time I was 8, we ended up moving over there. And then I spent the next, 10 or 11 years with him before I moved to Myrtle Beach. And from there, it was, jiu-jitsu wasn't real. So, I mean, DK wasn't down yet.
No.
There was a Sarah affiliate, Frankie Patches. He wasn't down yet. So really, it was behind, and I'm sure there was great jiu-jitsu in the Carolinas, but, I'm 19. I don't even know my way around yet. So I just my parents moved to Pawleys Island so I could try to catch in-state tuition at Coastal, which did not end up working out for them. So I'm going around trying to find it. And, we had MMA. So I first walked into FEMA for a little bit, but there wasn't really any jiu-jitsu instruction. And at that time, my deal was, I'm not really going to fight MMA. My family doesn't really want it. Like a bunch of different things that just did not make sense for me to fight. I was trying to compete in jiu-jitsu at a high level. So I really bounced around, ended up going to the Sarah affiliate for a while with Frankie. And then just some things happened, like tend to happen in MMA careers. And then that's when I kind of hit the up and then came to Fitness Edge. And I was texting Derek about it. I said, dude, it's crazy when you look at it because little things could change the entire course of your life, right? I text, I've heard great things. And like now we have a fighter that's been to a higher level and I'd like to come learn and about structure because I was just doing jiu-jitsu and then sparring some random guys trying to not get hit and take them down. And that's only going to take you so far, So I came over and we had a meeting at one of the gyms and sat down and, thankfully the answer was yes, I could come train with the team because at that point in time, you bounce around enough, you build up a rep where it's like, okay, is it you? Is it them? I've heard say things like, are you, so the grace I'm showing there. And that's when I started, I came over with 3 amateur fights, but really they were just jiu-jitsu matches with gloves on. I was kicking, I might as well have been kicking the knee and trying. I remember walking into the cage being like, I'm not ready for these fights. Like, this is nuts. But then came over, and then that was the first introduction to structure, pad work, mixing all of it together, which is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so I remember those days very well, man. That was like, I think, you ended up, what'd you go? Did you go 5-0 as amateur?
Yeah. I think I had 8. I always tell these guys that like, get mad they didn't finish the guy or whatever. I'm like, dude, I had 8 minutes in the cage in 5 fights.
Yeah.
My butt hit the stool. My brain was fine. I was plenty tough. My body was like, yeah, we don't do this. We don't know how to deal with this adrenaline for more than 3 minutes.
Yeah, man. It's so yeah, you would I think you won all 5 of your amateurs by rear naked choke.
There was one triangle. I think my debut was a guillotine, and then everything else was rear naked choke. And then my first 3 pro fights were rear naked choke. It was like 4 or 5 minutes, and then I ran into a guy who beat me from bell to bell mercilessly. And as demoralizing as it was, then it was kind of like, okay, like you always have questions about yourself. Like you always want to think you're going to be the tough guy. It's like not going to fade or lift your chin to look to be choked. But you see your friends break or, guys you respect, you're never sure. And then I ran into one guy that I just could not choke. And then he just beat me mercilessly. And I was like, okay, well, I'm either really stupid or as tough as I thought. So at least I'm here still, And that was the first tough one to swallow. And then, just kept fighting. And then ran into Nicholas, who's now in the UFC. He knocked me out as well. But again, it was just ups and downs and ups and downs. And it felt like it was taking forever. And now you look back and that was almost 10 years ago,
Yeah, it's so crazy how fast. I was talking to him. It's so crazy how you fought Jared Gordon. And, I remember we were in Atlantic City. You fought on the same card as him when he was like the main event or something like that.
I think he got signed that night on the show. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And I remember again, like that, just that weird stuff that happens where you're like, what the heck? I remember fighting a guy later on, one of my fights, like my 5th fight, I think, that he had fought and being in an elevator with him and asking like, he's like, oh, you fighting tonight? I said, yeah. I said, I think I'm fighting a guy you fought. And he's like, oh man, he's really, his hips are great. Like you're not gonna be able to take him down, blah, blah. And then we got off the elevator and I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay. And then I got halfway down the hallway and he's like, hey, wait, are you Joe? I was like, yes. And he's like, yeah, you're gonna do great, blah, blah. I was like, well, now I'm terrified. But but I saw him
people don't
in the lobby.
People don't really understand whenever they're like, man, I'm just gonna tell him he's a killer or something like that. It's like, no, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear how good he is.
Absolutely not. And then I saw him afterward getting pizza or something after the fight. And he was like, hey, I'll be seeing you in the UFC soon, I'm sure. And like, oddly enough, it's like, yeah, actually across from you, which is crazy. But it's just crazy how that goes. Like, you think it's safe. I was telling everybody that all the time. Like, I feel like I thought it was safe to like be fans of certain guys because you're like, well, I'm never going to see that guy. I'm never going to see Jim Miller. He's one of my favorites, but retired by then. Then you're standing across. You're like, oh crap! Like now I got to separate.
I wanted to ask you about that. So whenever you get the call and you hear the name Jim Miller, like what goes through your head? I mean, because obviously the guy's been around for a long time and he's tough as nails, right? So, and he holds UFC records. I think the most fights or the most wins or something like that.
Most submission wins, I think.
So he holds a couple of them.
Yeah, I think he's got 44 fights or something like that, which is crazy. But just in the UFC, which is nuts. But yeah, I mean, when you get that call, I think you're always going to get both responses, and they might be at different times in the camp or at the same time. I mean, Derek will know this. I think anybody that takes a fight, you have the heck yeah, let's go, and then you also have the there's no possible way I could beat this guy.
Yeah.
And I think anybody that says the opposite is just stupid or lying. And I think stupid might be nice. Ignorance is bliss. But if you're the other one's just lying, I think. And I think I've had that in every single fight, except maybe the ones I lost, where I take an exhale, I'm like, oh, this is a good matchup, and then all of a sudden you're in a close decision or worse. But yeah, with that one, it was like I had already trained with Holtzman a lot, who fought like 1 or 2 fights before that. He fought Jim. So that kind of humanized him in itself, because I was playing the role of Miller for that camp. So it's like in that regard, I was looking a lot more at him like a peer than up here, because then a buddy that I had been training with went out there and kind of did really well with him. But I remember at one point, my manager at the time wanting that fight, and I've seen him since kind of hunting him down for his guys, and it's backfired tremendously. So at one point, he tried to put me in short notice. It was like 2 weeks, and we were like, John Salter actually was like, he's always been very good about, because I think that when you're, especially like starting out in the UFC or early on, like you get signed. I mean, I did the same thing at CFFC. I do it everywhere. Like you have big ambitions. You want to get after everybody. You're just like, dude, let me. And you need somebody in your ear sometimes being like, hey man, like, you're getting paid 10 and 10 no matter who you fight. Let's fight an entry level fight.
Right.
I've seen guys that didn't have that voice in their ear, kind of not make it, because they're just, sometimes you get what you want in the UFC. You start asking for big fights, they'll give it to you. Because, look at like the Miller fight, for example. I was, I think I was making 14 and 14. He made 110 and 110. So like the UFC, even if I win, I was joking, like, man, they could have tipped me out a couple, 50 grand, because I saved them 110,000. Like, so really it's a cheap date for them to book you against the guys you're calling out. So you gotta be careful with that. All that to say, I think it came up, and I text Jeff and I text John, and they were like, John was like, I like that with a full camp. He's got a lot of experience. And Jeff was like, dude, I think Scott squeezed the last little juice out of his career, man. And then all of a sudden he just came back and went on a tear, So I think I beat him, and then I think Alex Hernandez had a close decision with him, and then until the Bobby Green fight, he was, crushing guys. So when he makes that walk out and you're staring at him, almost where being a fan almost bit me in the butt, because I knew his walkout song, I knew all that, but then I saw him fight in Jersey right after I got signed. He came out something fun, some Queen song or something. The night he came out, he was breaking the record for most fights. He came back out to Bad Moon Rising. I remember that little bad voice in the back of my head being like, "Whoa, he's here to beat the record tonight. Like, this is vintage Jim Miller." Oh crap! But then I remember him staring me down and pacing and being like, "Okay, this is just something people do when they're nervous. He's mad dogging you. Like, you look really calm to him right now, and you're not calm. So take it with a grain of salt, And it's just it ended up being a super boring fight, but he's dangerous.
I mean, dude, it's a fight though, man, and that's what a lot of people don't understand is it may look like it's boring, but you are working your ass off down there, especially when
is like holding a guy like that down. And we were laughing, me and Jeff. He's even said in interviews like, I only had 1 or 2 boring fights, and he names that fight. I'm like, yeah, but you chose to lay on the bottom. Like, you're down 2-0 or 1-1, but I'm winning the round. Like, you got to get desperate to try to get up. You didn't do it. So if you do that, we had 1 scramble, and I ended up bundling his legs, like kind of like the Habib lock, and he scrambled out, and then he never opened up again, So it was boring, but I had diapers to buy, so it's like you just need the win.
Well, we talked about that before too, like the whole fighter versus the fan perspective. Fans are very selfish. They don't care about the fighter. They don't care about the families. And as a fighter, that's your number one priority, right? Like, who cares if it's a boring fight all the time? If you get the win and you're getting paid, then that's what you're there to do.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, man. I think sometimes too, it is fun. Like, you get in the like my Jared Gordon fight. There was, he was the veteran, and I had seen him coming up, and his thing was like breaking guys with pressure. And I think, somebody made the mistake of telling me what they heard in an interview or something, and it gets in your head like, oh, he said you're just a jiu-jitsu guy. He's going to break you with pressure. And in that 3rd round, I got to having fun slinging a little bit. And now you're like, oh man, I got to so much fun proving a point that I didn't need to back up or whatever, that I never scored enough to solidify the round, and now it's up to somebody's opinion. You know, it's not
Yeah.
fun when you're getting half your check come Monday. Like, oh, I wish I would have just taken him back down and held him. But
Right. Yeah.
so, but I mean, at the same time, you get guys that you know, they win a ton of fights by being super boring, and they're not welcome back even off a win. So I know it's a double-edged sword. You know, you got to try to do both, but you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, it kind of depends on the dance partner. You know, I mean, Jim Miller, like, yeah, he's a great all around fighter, but he's known for being a grappler.
Yeah, he's known for being a grappler. And then you can look at there's sometimes where he doesn't really pull the trigger either. If you look at the Bobby Green fight, it's like everybody's yelling, literally yelling, like, let's take this dude down, you know. And he chooses to stand and bang with Bobby Green. And it's just
You're having fun, but shoot.
Yeah.
When he broke his foot, his hand, all that, you're like, oh man, like
yeah.
fight again for 6 months now. I mean, I guess he doesn't need a paycheck as much as some guys do, but that kind of sucks too.
Yeah. So tell us about your next fight with Grant Dawson. Obviously, you know Grant Dawson. He's fought Bobby Green. He's fought some killers as well. When you get the call for Grant Dawson, like, is that one of those guys where, I guess you know you get stoked for off the bat? Well, listen, Joe's a very humble dude anyway, so I don't think he would tell us if it wasn't. I think he would still say, yeah, you know, it got me super excited. But you know, out of all the opponents you fought so far, like, is Grant Dawson at the top for you?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think every fight has its own challenges, you know, and every fight, you know, the cliche is the most important, but I don't know. I've had guys with not records like Grant Dawson. Like, I fought that Alex De Silva, and dude, like, he was 1-2 in the UFC, and they were talking about him being a top 15 caliber guy as he's walking out, and one of the toughest fights I've had. So, you know, they're all super tough at this level, you know, but I think with him, it's an interesting match. Like, it was super exciting out of the gate because I know enough about him where I was like, I really didn't watch film until about, you know, this week because I was letting Jeff do it, but like I was familiar enough with him. I knew right away this is as close to a specialist as it gets. That's a tough nut to crack, but it's fun. You know, it's also in my wheelhouse because it's no secret he's gonna. I watched last night. He takes everybody down. You know, he wants to go to the ground immediately, and he's very relentless about it. I've seen him be in some really bad spots, and you know, honestly, the Rick Glenn fight he probably lost, but he got called at the bell, and then the Bobby Green fight. But aside from that, he'll get dropped, but then he just insists on wrestling, and he's so good there that you know he's kind of taking guys lunch on the ground because they're rushing back to the feet or you know, just making really bad decisions, or that cliche of like they don't want to be on their back, which I don't either. But you hear as soon as guys get taken down, you hear it's like a very low level coaching thinking. It reminds me of the parents at wrestling matches that go, you know, on the Robbie, you're like, well, on the whistle, except they're getting mat returned as soon as they get up. Like, maybe fight the hands first or something. So like he takes the back like a crazy person as soon as they pop up. So I got to watch that and go, yeah, exactly. And I got to watch that and go like, I don't think I make those mistakes. So it's the opposite of every fight I've ever had, right? Every fight I have, close distance, don't get hit, land decent shots, and put them on their butt. This is like, try to take his head off, try to get back up. If you can't, try to submit him. But his offense is putting me in my comfort zone, you know, my comfort level. So
absolutely, yeah.
It makes it really exciting. And the fact that, you know, coming off a terrible loss, him too, I feel like they put us together. We're like, cool, you guys are both still in the upper echelon. Like, here's a mulligan, figure it out. One's going on toward the rankings, and the other one, then you'll take your step back. You know, really weird. Not the name I was expecting, but also like, what a blessing to have a guy. You know, he was 15 or 14 one fight ago. So things on the other side of a win against him.
Yeah, this definitely puts you up in the rankings a little bit more. I saw you're 35 right now in the world.
Yeah,
and so you know,
it's a big jump.
Yeah, beating him. You know, if he was, I don't know what he's ranked right now, but
I mean, he's got to be top 20. I would think.
Top 20. That's top 20, and it's crazy because my last guy, you know, Drakkar Close was like 22 or 20. Yeah. So in a weird way, I got the next step up, regardless. Which is
well, bud. You know, you were winning that fight, and you know, a small little mishap on your part, and that's what changed the fight, man. It was nothing as far as him being better than you.
Yeah, easy when you see stuff like that, and that's what I tell guys. Like, people be like, "Oh, who should I bet on in this fight?" You're like, man, nobody. Like, money. Like, do not Cody Brundage and Bo Nickel. I was laughing like he's like a minus 3,000 favorite.
Oh,
Like,
I know, right?
in 4-ounce gloves, no one should
You
ever
can't.
think it could be me versus a 9-year-old. I should not be a minus
Yes.
3,000 favorite. You know, like this sport
Yeah.
is unforgiving and crazy. So,
And
yeah.
for the first couple of minutes of that fight, Brundage actually he looked pretty good. You know,
Dangerous.
I was in my head, I was thinking I should have just at least bet 100.
For sure.
Yeah, but you know, and that's the way it is, man. It's so crazy in this sport, you know, just a little bitty thing, even an off night, the way you feel, the way your morning was, or something that can throw you off during the day of the fight, or just as simple as something that somebody says, you know,
Yep.
to you that makes you like second guess yourself and different things like that. So it's, you know, just I mean, small little mishap on your end, man, and that fight's a completely different fight, in my opinion. You know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was. I think most people who watched that, were probably scoring it for Joe.
Oh, for sure.
Up until obviously,
until,
you know,
obviously.
when it
Thing
happened.
where like it's funny because you're the competitor, right? And you hold yourself to a high standard. So I would get home and it would be one or the other, right? Someone, and people never know what to say, so it's not knocking them. It's just funny. Like you would have somebody that'd be like, "Man, total fluke," and I'd be like, "No, I failed the back take. I should have done this, should have done that." And then on the other side, you have somebody that comes up and they're like, "Man, I'm really sorry you got beaten." You're like, "Well, you know what? It's a crazy sport. I didn't get beat per se." You know, like you start going back and forth. You don't like. I said to somebody, I'm like, "Dude, I'm like, it's not a great skill to have, but I lost a ton as a kid. I'm a pretty good loser." But I didn't even know how to process it because you're like, man, like I would have rather him just beat me bell to bell.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
you know, and then you're like, okay, yeah, you were better, or even you were better that night, but like this one hurts, you know. But yeah, man, crazy stuff. And then I was saying in an interview the other day, like someone asked about that, like they were kind of scared to kick the tires and asked that question. I'm like, yeah, man. I'm like, bro, I'm like, I always laugh at these guys that are undefeated because it's like they're always like fighting's the best, this and that, and then they get injured or you know they have to pull out of a fight, and all of a sudden, or they're broke the first time out of many, and they're like, oh man, this game sucks and blah blah. Like, dude, like you have no idea. I'm like, they're like, what did you learn from this loss? I was like, that I love fighting as much as I ever loved it. Cause I was back on Monday training. You know, I basically had an arm I couldn't use, but we were doing footwork and you know Jeff had me dodging punches and whatever else. So you know, it's like, dude, you learn how much you love the sport in the bad times, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Let's talk a little bit about your coach, Jeff Gima. A lot of people call him Yoda, Uncle Jeff. You hear him called so many. Man, I've known Jeff for, gosh, man, since I was 1-on-1 as a professional fighter, dude. Was the first time I met Jeff, and then kind of reconnected with him at a fight lab after I fought, and then started. Anytime I'd come home on leave, I would start, you know, going and training with him. He used to train at a place called in Gastonia. It was called Ryan Hoover's Extreme Karate, and it was the only place around that had like a boxing ring, and they did MMA there, and there's a lot of good fighters. And Jeff was like one of the Muay Thai coach there and the Jiu-Jitsu coach there, and it was in an old skating ring. It was massive, and I was just like, holy shit, like this is awesome, you know. And you go and you train with Jeff, and it's just like, wow, this guy is so knowledgeable and like a Buddhist monk almost, you know, just his whole demeanor about everything. Now, don't get me wrong, Jeff's funny as fuck. And, you know, he makes jokes and cracks on people. And
I heard him make a few whenever I was there.
yeah. So, but his understanding and the way he's able to analyze fights and the way he's able to break down fights and the way he's able to break down people and his just whole methodology, I guess you can say, is something that I try to emulate myself. You know, he's just an amazing individual. But you know, you just explain, Joe, how you kind of came into contact with Jeff, because he's a literal hidden gem. That's what
Yeah.
people don't understand is like he used to train my coach. He trained Kurt Pellegrino. Like Kurt used to go to his house and live, and like this was before anybody knew about anything about Jeff. You know, he was training top level guys, you know, and traveling.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And the thing is like he doesn't want the credit. He's not really trying to
Or
make
money.
buck. Like, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, the first time I ever saw Jeff, I didn't know it was him. When we were at USFFC, I fought, and he was there with Dylan Calla, I think, but I didn't
Yeah,
know
I
that.
remember that.
They
Yeah.
weren't in our locker room or anything. I saw you talking to him, and I think he had short hair at the time. He was real muscular. He was a couple, he's still muscular, but like he wears hoodies everywhere now. But he had like a sleeveless shirt. I was like, oh, it must be like, I remember he said something to you about like, I wish we would have linked up sooner or at the same time. And I went, oh, he must have been a military guy that DK knows. I don't know why my brain did that, but I never really followed up and asked a question about it. And then I think when you guys were going to Italy, you got on his team, and then you guys were going to do some cross training there. And I may have like followed their Instagram page, and that was like the extent of it. But then when I fought at 864, I was warming up in the back, and then everybody that's seen Jeff hold pads or warm fighters up specifically, the whole, I mean, even at the UFC, like the room stops when Jeff starts doing his thing, and everyone just stops, like, who is that, and how does he know this? And he had these real old Thai pads, and I remember talking to him about those. Me and John were there, and we spoke to him, and then we were talking about it. I said, "Oh yeah," I said, "You." He said who he was. I'm like, oh, "I know who you are. Seen on Instagram or whatever." I said, "He put out a really good video from front headlock to single leg X." And I remember being like, "Oh, I love that entry, blah, blah. I've been trying that a bunch because I watched your videos or whatever." And then we talked. I said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to come up, sometime." And that was the end of it. And then he had a guy fighting that night in the main event. I was like the co-main. I ended up, fighting two really, like, probably the best 2 rounds I ever fought up to that point against Moda. And then just mismanaged energy, inexperience, ended up getting knocked out in the third, just like dead legs. Couldn't couldn't take him down anymore. And his guy ended up losing as well. Same type of thing. And we saw him in the back. We said, "How'd you guys do?" He said, "Same thing as yours." Like, outclassed him and then just made a mistake. And that was the end of it. And then that, obviously you're licking your wounds, all depressed and everything. And his wife reached out on Instagram, was like, "Hey," and this kind of spoke, I thought, to who Jeff is. Like, coming off a loss as like a prospect, he could have been like, yeah, another guy that lost, whatever. She hit me up, was like, "Hey, my husband doesn't do social media. He mentioned you guys met, and he wanted you to have his number should you ever want any kind of, training or cross training, or if you're in the area ever." I was like, "That's awesome." But again, like, things are so tight at that point. I really wasn't even working beyond like some, teaching a class and some personal training and just like scraping by. So like the means to get to Charlotte aren't really there. But when we,
what was that? How long a drive was that from Wilmington?
The same thing. I do think the drive is easier from Wilmington somehow than Myrtle Beach. It's less turns, just a straight shot.
Yeah.
But it's still the same distance. And but then Salter was fighting Lovato, and then a hurricane hit. So he had to get up there early to get to the airport, and we had to evacuate anyway. So we all kind of went, and then I didn't go the first night. We went to John Piper's to train the first day we got there. And then we had texted Jeff, and John went over, and he was flying out the next day. I couldn't make it, and I was going to go the next day. And he got done there, and he was like, "I just finished up. I think in my entire career, it's the best practice I've ever been to." And I was like, "Oh, I can't wait to go." And then I went, and then we started, we were talking about, we got along really well, of course. And, Jeff's just a great guy. And from there on out, it was whenever we could. And then once I fought one more time in combat, had another fight after that, and then got the Contender Series. And John was going up to help Barbarena because, Barbarena is more of a kickboxer that struggled with wrestlers. And then I would tag along. And then by then, I want to say Holtzman was there. When I was getting ready for the Contender Series, I went every single week. And Holtzman was there getting ready for a fight in Newark, oddly enough. And then same type of thing. Like he's really well rounded everywhere, but still wanted to keep most of his fights standing. It was the perfect excuse to get up there, around a guy that was doing, was a little ahead of me and older than me and pretty much better than me everywhere. And get the break speed off me, but then learn from Jeff too. So then from there on out, every camp we had, we would always do 2 days a week. And I continued that, and he would program for me when I was home. Nutrition, the whole nine, come to the fight. And then I would say maybe 3 fights ago was when, just not having all the training partners I needed and just having to travel so much. I was going, I was in Wilmington. I would go 2 or 3 days a week. This is the Gordon camp. It was the last time I did this. I would go 2 or 3 times a week back to Myrtle Beach to work with Chris Gowd on the boxing. I would spar with Cody some and, a couple other guys. And then I would go back to Wilmington. Then I go to Charlotte. And then, dude, after a while, I just couldn't do it on my body, my mind. And then when we had the kids, or at least our daughter, it was like first year of her life, man, I'm just gone all the time. And, which I know is a sacrifice you got to make. But at that point, I'm like, it doesn't really need to be this way. So did the camp at Jeff's the first time, living in his house, the works, he's doing the meal prep. Like he's just, if you think he's a great coach, he's a better cook. If you think he's a better cook, he, whatever. He just does everything better than
he tries to be the best at it.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so then, right after that, he mentioned that he was hoping to revamp the night classes and get a jiu-jitsu program going. And, at that point in time, and Derek, you probably know, you have kids, like daycare is a killer. We're getting ready to have a second. You're like, you know what? Like, I'm going to be paying $2,000 a month in daycare. That's basically what my wife's going to bring home working. So it was like, okay, I can take on the job of teaching, come up here, and we'll lose that daycare fee. And, then I don't have to be away from my family all the time going nuts. Because, it is nice because you get to focus so much. But then, dude, like, after that training session, some days you're done at 4 o'clock. You're just sitting there, all sad and just miserable. And you're like, what am I doing with my life? Like, the whole point of this job is freedom. And now I'm just kind of in this, it's a very nice room you're in, but you're like, I'm in this little cell almost, Holtzman made the joke that he's like, when you get in there, you'll see my tally marks like prison, and so it was just a no brainer. So then we just kind of packed up and came, and, Casey's awesome about that is so many times. I feel like all the time I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing now. And she's like, yeah, cool, great. And you're like, really? I keep always going in real cautious. Like, is this the one you want to kill me with? And like,
yeah,
but,
Megan's been Megan's a trooper for me as well, man.
Dude, and
yeah,
how many times do you see that as a coach, and probably with your peers when you're fighting, of like these guys get a girlfriend, and dude, it can make or break. Like
it's make or break, dude. Yeah, everybody thought this was going to break you.
Yep.
I remember us talking about that a long time ago. Just
dude. And not to get off Jeff, but I'll say this about Jeff. One more thing is like, it's not like he's fierce in his approach to fighting, and he, his IQ is unmatched. But also, like what I've noticed is like he makes me a better person. He holds you accountable, and not in a way where he's ever pulling you aside and being like, "Hey, man," but like being around him just makes you want to be better. I've always been. And this is bad, and sometimes it's just because what you're fed and what you feed your mind, your soul. But, the competitor, you think you got to just stomp on everybody and be this ruthless, and he has this give back mentality of like, man, you got to meet people where they're at. You've got to, and that obviously started changing me when I kind of rediscovered my faith, but also like somebody that actually holds you accountable to that. Like he'll say stuff all the time and be like, well, isn't that what the Bible says? Like you should, and you're like, dang, yeah. So like, I feel like it's the next step in like the maturation process is being around somebody like that who's just living,
yeah, dude. He's like a killer mentor, and like I said, man, he's somebody that I emulate to be like, and I emulate to hold myself accountable for just as well, man. Because anytime that I'm around him, that you just feel like you need to level up your whole body, going to Italy with him was a cool experience. I had him here for our grand opening for a Muay Thai seminar, and he's like, I'm like, hey man, how much do I owe you? He's like, oh, we won't be exchanging any monies.
Crazy.
And I'm like, what? I was like, dude, let me pay you for like coming in. Like you drove 4 hours down here, and it was like Impa was training then. He brought Impa. He brought, the whole crew came down. Dylan Cal, Ricky Rank, like all these guys came down.
And one of the other things he does, like you just said, Impa, and that kind of, he shows people grace behind their back. And I've gotten arguments with people at places because I'm trying to do that now, and like it pulls you to a higher standard where like you'll go somewhere, you spend all this time with Jeff, you come back and they're like, well, you were okay with this before. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to gossip anymore. I don't want to talk poorly about anybody. Like, what are you talking about? You're like, you used to, I know that was before, but now this is different. Like I'm being held to a different standard, You won't get him. Like, Impa moved to Florida to go train at, Kill Cliff. And he genuinely roots for Impa. Like, we'll look at the guy he's fighting, like, oh, I think he's got a great chance and this and that. He can beat anybody in the world. Like, I'm so glad to see him doing well. Like, and that's when it's just you and him. Like, you're like, all right, give me how do you think this fight's going to go? He's like, he's going to knock him dead. Like, he is loyal and he shows grace and he's just a good dude. And, this sport is cutthroat. And, I think we all kind of follow the suit of trying to be that way. And he's just the opposite, man. There's so much beyond fighting. And I think he gets that as a coach. And because he's not greedy, he doesn't have to be that way. And then, trickle down effect.
Yeah. Yeah. He's, I like the whole standard at Jimmo, where the pros go. It's where the pros train, and he holds himself.
Whenever I was there, I went up there whenever I was filming Austin, and the sparring looked great, man. Like, I don't know any of their names, but there was a couple guys in there sparring where
his structure and the way he does things is awesome. I call him Jimo rounds. It's the 30 seconds on with 10-second break, You do 30 seconds on of like kickboxing
Like
without
running 400s, dude. You just gassed after it. Pads the same way. Like I had
yeah,
pads today. Like, am I even in shape? Like, how can you gas me out in 45 seconds and then I got to take a
yeah.
break? It's crazy.
Yeah, so I love the way he structures things and does things, but it's like I told you on the text, before the call, I was like, man, you couldn't have picked a better guy to kind of
Yeah, and I said
be
this
around.
to Casey when we were coming here. It was like, 'cause, people always say stuff and not bad or good or whatever, but just everybody has an opinion on everything. Like, you could do this instead, you could do that instead. And I was like, I'd rather go lose. Like, just say, God appears. He's like, hey, Joe, you're going to lose your next 5 fights here. Okay, I'd rather lose alongside Jeff than go win at some place where I don't agree how they're doing it, or where
Yes.
I'm just going to be a
Yeah.
number there. Anything else? It's like, no, this is more than fighting. And he gets that, I get that. Like, I think it's just like it's way more about who you're doing it with all the time. And then you look back and you have those great times. Like, dude, there's fights like think about the one we were when I lost to that Caesar kid. Like, dude,
Yeah.
obviously that's things as a competitor, but like I still got pics that pop up my digital picture frame of the New York Festival, the food and this, that. Like, it's the times and the people you're with and the memories we're trying to die with, right? Like, I think he gets that as a coach because he's lived a little bit and he's not in it just for like I'm living and dying off of whether you win or lose,
Right, right.
and I feel like that's kind of trickled down to me now. Like, I've had students, and I'm sure it's the same for you because you had a career. You had a great career. I had a career. It's like people come up and be like, "Oh, I accidentally registered under this. Like, is that okay?" And I'm like, "Man, like, when I walk out there in that cage and Bruce Buffer says my name, like, that's my time. Like, I just want you to
Yeah,
go through all the tournament. Like, I don't care if you're still training over here and getting belted under this guy. Like, come train. Oh, I'm late for class. Like, dude, I'd rather you're here than you're not. And I was not
absolutely.
always
Yeah.
like that at all. And
Yeah.
that's why I want to be around guys like Jeff.
Yeah, I'm the same way, man. Like we have we have people that pay membership here, come here and train, but they get belted other places, and that's perfectly fine, dude. It's like,
But I think a lot
you
of
know,
times it's hard when guys didn't have their time because now you're
yes,
like,
yeah.
well, no, I need you to be my thing. Like, it's like, no, I'm like, I got my own thing going on. Like, yeah, I just want to teach jiu-jitsu and hang out with you, and hopefully you learn something from it.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one, for a lot of people to get, but I just feel like it's going to raise the room anyways. You allow other people to come in and train with your guys that you call your guys anyways. It's just going to raise the room up anyways, and it just builds a little bit more steam. And then, and that's why it's like, man, we get people that come in here. It's like, man, you got a great group of guys, man. And it's like, we've been really blessed with having a good, good group of people, man. I always
Yeah,
say
and then
assholes don't
too,
last.
when you're not, yeah, and when you're not fueled by ego, you don't hold back as a coach, right? Like, now you're
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
dude, I feel like every night, and I'm sure it's the same. Like, when you're passionate, it's hard to hold it in. It's like truth serum, right? So it's like somebody asked you a question, dude. I would be the worst private lesson salesman in the world because all you got to do is ask me a question, and I can't not because I still love the sport. So it's like, dude,
Right.
like all this, but then you're like, oh man, like people will be like, oh, you're giving away. It's like, no, man,
Well,
like
and you care about the growth of your students too. So it's
exactly.
not just
And here's
like
the thing: is like, dude,
the growth of your pocket.
everyone's gonna get better. Like, oh, I
Yes.
was teaching single leg X, but you asked about Kimura's like, but now when you Kimura, the guy that's training here, he's gonna ask how you got, and everybody's gonna get better. Like, it
Yeah.
ain't, and I'm sure comes the financial aspect of it's gonna come back around and succeed either way.
Yeah. I've always told myself this, man. Like, if you're a good person, good things are gonna happen. And that's what I was saying, man. Like, the whole time I was at, the other gym and stuff and coming up, and I was like, all right, eventually good things are gonna happen. Eventually good things are gonna happen. You just carry on day after day. And then, now it's like I get to do what I love. I have an amazing academy that, is, doing well and, prospering. And, I'm just very extremely blessed, and I just, again, it's like I've tried to treat myself, as a good person. And, I got baptized again too. So we talked about faith a little bit. I rededicated my faith, and a lot of different things have happened within, since the last time me and Joe have talked,
Yeah, dude,
as
that's
far as
awesome.
like,
And I
so
feel like I do the same thing, like you said, like you take these leaps of faith where you're like, you're just gonna do it in good faith, and then like I've done it like private lesson, yeah, you forgot to pay, like whatever, whatever it is.
for
And I've
sure.
always,
Yeah.
or just like I always looked at stuff like even at like 17, 18, like I leave work, and go to the gym late or whatever. And and I'm like, yeah, like you're not working as much as other kids that are saving money for college. Like, yeah, I know, but this is for the future. This is an investment. But I feel like I do the same thing I said with Casey, where I'm like, are you sure? Like, I just feel like I do the same thing. I push my luck with God. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna keep working for nothing or investing in
Yeah.
things that you can't actually see. Like, are you sure this is what I'm supposed to be doing? And then it always just seems to like it's all good. I feel like I've been at tournaments that I traveled to legitimately. One of those PGLs in Jersey. I don't even think I have money for like food on the way home. And I cornered some guy's kid who was a lawyer who asked me to, and he's like, "Oh man, here, please take this." I'm like, "No, I don't need that." And he handed me $40. I'm like, "Dude, I can get Wawa on the way home." Like, but like you're like, "Dude, that's crazy." Like, I didn't do it with that intention, Like, it just always seems to work out in the way like you're just doing the right thing, And it's the same thing for you and for a lot of guys that are out there just trying to help the next generation,
Yeah.
Yeah. So your next fight, June 1st, UFC 302. That's going to be a big card, right? The headliner, Poirier and Islam. Safe to say, biggest card that you fought on so far?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And I said it's kind of cool because like Poirier is one of my all-time favorite fighters. So now I say I have 5 favorite fighters. This is what I was thinking about the other day. That's why I say it. Frank Yeager, Jim Miller, Poirier, Chris Weidman, and Damian Maia. And now, if God willing makes the fight, everybody makes it healthy. I was on Frank Yeager's undercard. I'll be on Poirier's undercard. I fought Jim Miller. I train with Chris Weidman all the time. And I don't have any contact with Damian Maia, but I was like, that's pretty awesome, But
Hey,
that's
4
pretty
out
crazy,
of 5, bro, ain't bad.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, it's pretty wild. Like, so to be on the lightweight title fight undercard and all that is awesome.
Yeah.
Not to mention, this is not 0.0001% chance, but like, crazy stuff happens. Guys miss weight and this and that. You never know.
And
You
then
got
you're
high
bumping
quintiles
all the way
stuff,
up.
You never know. So it's always good to be on those cards. You just never know. There's always a good trickle down effect one way or the other.
For sure.
Yeah, biggest in my career for sure.
I would love to come to that fight, but we're coming. We got Austin fights in PA the weekend after that. So
I saw that. Yes, that's so funny because we got guys that ran combat the same weekend, and the one guy he trains with Austin a good bit, Eddie. And at the last fight, I cornered him for the first time, and he was like, "We got done." He's like, "Coach, shake my hand right now. You're never gonna miss a fight of mine." I'm like, "If I'm not fighting, I'm there." He's fighting next weekend. I go, "Oh man, I was so worried I wasn't going to spend enough time in beautiful New Jersey this summer that I'm going 2 times in 2 weekends. Like, this is great."
Isn't it the best, dude? Yeah.
Newark and Atlantic City, just like
Oh man,
where dreams go to die and also be made in fighting, I guess.
Yes, that's it.
So everybody who's watched your career, knows you as a person, we all know you to be a very humble dude, right? But say you go out there and you put a stamp on it, right? You get your hand raised, maybe spectacular fashion, maybe not. Maybe it's a grinder. Does Joe Solecki call anybody out?
Probably not. I could see the next logical thing to do would be to ask for a ranking, a ranked opponent. But I think if I did that, that would probably be as far as it would go. It's just I never really planned for that because the sport's so nuts. When I fought that De Silva guy, it was so funny because the fight before I thought I beat Jared Gordon. I wasn't sure. You're in the heat of the moment. You don't know. But I looked at Jeff and John. They're like, "We got it," and they raised his hand. Whatever. But then when we did it, it was a crazy fight. A point got taken away. A 10-8 round. All this stuff, and he was there, and I was just like, "Okay, I've been here before." We don't know what he's going to say. The ref was talking to me about fishing. You're from North Carolina, you fish. I'm like, I'm trying to focus on this life-changing decision, But when and the other guy's dancing and he's going and he's celebrating, I was like, it reminded me of that meme with James Franco in that movie. He has the noose on his neck. He goes, first time. It's just like, dude, this sport's so crazy. Like, bro, this guy was so certain he won. I was like, I'm pretty sure I won, but I'm not even that confident because this is crazy, So it's the same type of thing. Like, I don't ever, there's no plan for after the fight. I always talk about it like, yo, God willing, I'm healthy, we'll meet up. But aside from that, like I'm playing in the hospital, But I would say there's no doubt. I go out there and get my job done with him. The next logical thing is for a ranking, but there's no way. And you never know. You never know what they have in store and who's going to pull out and who's going to, it's crazy. So, but I would think that'd be the next logical step for sure.
Gotcha.
I think the only time I've somewhat seen Joe talk any smack, I think it might have been Matt Wyman.
Yes. Dude, yes. You can only push a man so far, right? So like, he was talking for 3 rounds. Like the freaking Joker. Like I hit him and he'd say like, "Oh, is that it?" You're like, dude, this is like he's like heckling me. And then thank God I waited for the last 10 seconds because it lit a fire under him, and he got back on top. He just had some little last. But he said, like, because I knew he was losing a lot, and he was older. And he said, "What are you going to do, Joe? You can't finish me." And I said, "I'm going to put you out of a job." And then, dude, he lost it. Like, I waited. I had one thing, but it was the ace in the hole, and it just set him off. He was trying to fight afterward in the back room. Like, they wouldn't let us in the green room because he was there making a scene. It was hysterical.
Oh, wow.
It was really funny. And then after that, he was Salter was in the cage. Jeff didn't come in the cage, of course. And Chris Dowd's there. He really can't walk up the steps, so he couldn't get in the cage. So it's just John. He's happy. It's my debut. And he's looking at John. He's like, "Don't smile, Cornerman. I'll kill you." You know. And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, dude, what I just did to you, this guy does to me every single day. Like, don't. And he's fresh. Like, please don't do this. You know, like, and it was so funny. It was just.
Oh wow.
And John fought. What weight class was he in?
85. 85. He's massive.
Yeah, he was a big guy.
Please
he
don't
fought.
do this.
Was it Masasi?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a murderer. Yeah. Please don't fight him. My gosh, especially after 3 rounds. But yeah, that was. But then honestly, the next day, he came up at breakfast and was super cool. It's really funny because I was sitting with my. We were having breakfast with my lifelong coach, John Hassett, and he's hysterical. He's awesome. He's the nicest guy. He's a little nuts in the sense of like I would not cross him. And he's sitting there. He comes back from the buffet. He puts his food down. And he's behind Wyman. I'm like, what is he doing? And then we get done. This and that. He shake hands. He goes out of ways. He was kidding, but he was not kidding. He's like, just didn't know what he was gonna do, man. If he got crazy, I thought maybe I'd hop on his back, sink the choke. He's like, maybe the headline reads like he couldn't finish it, but the old coach does. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're kidding, but you're not kidding because like he positioned himself perfectly where like he was gonna jump on his back. Like that was so funny. So
that's funny.
Yeah,
that is funny.
Yeah, that was so I had only met you doing the interview at the radio station beforehand, and then your first fight, a little bit of trash talk is like, man, is this where Joe flips the switch? We can see a different Joe from now on.
There's a little bit of a mean streak that has been kind of. There's a psycho in there, but he's on a very short chain. Thank God. Thank you, God. Like, thank you for fighting my faith. Because, and it's only in the time where I feel like I'm being disrespected or like bullied.
Yes.
But a lot of it is perception. That's a me problem. So, but like if somebody was like a backhanded compliment sometimes, it's like there's been a couple times in the gym where I've had that issue. And now I like to think as a 30-year-old with kids, faith, it's kind of gone, But man, like I've had those outbursts. Maybe 3-4 times, and or even if it's a backhanded remark, I'm pretty witty in that regard. So like, I had one guy come in, and he was just touching him up all over the place, and then he just tried some like crazy front wheel, tried to heel kick me in the head, and he missed, and I hit him with an uppercut, and I thought we had a moment where like he realized that was stupid too, and I was like, oh, how'd that work out for you? But like he didn't like that, like he didn't think it was funny at all. Like, so then I kind of, it's one of those situations where you're done sparring, you get pulled in the office at the gym, you're like, hey man, you can't be doing that. Like I thought we were having a moment, like, but sometimes I don't do well with like flash, but it's not my style, so I got
I don't like that shit either.
Well, obviously you have the Conor McGregors. That's the Chael Sonnen, I guess, is like one of or Tito, and that was a big thing for a while. People, and we all love it, right? Like we love to see the trash talk, but you also like to see the humbleness every now and again. Somebody's just humble, puts their head down and wins. You know what I mean?
But then you find out Joe's 5-2 in the UFC, and it's like it's been now he's just finally getting on the biggest card, of his career, so it's the humble guy kind of gets a back seat sometimes to these to other
that's
crew,
the only and it's crazy, right? Because MMA martial arts is built around discipline and respect, right? But it's like being disciplined and respectful now.
Doesn't get you as far as quick,
Right.
I mean, it's worked out for Dustin Poirier, but it's like, how long has it taken him though?
Yes.
But I mean, even Dustin, man, Dustin's talked a lot of smack in the past too, man.
Well, he'll only talk it whenever it's being talked to him.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like I'm all for genuity, like if it's you, like that's why I really like. I mean, now it's hard to root for him sometimes, but on the come up, I enjoyed McGregor. I think it was inspiring because he was. I feel like if you ran into him, that's how he would be,
Yeah.
But the weird part is when you meet the guy in the lobby and he's like, hey, man, sorry, I'm just playing a role. It's like, it comes off that way too. But it does work for these guys. They get the following. And, but for me, I think it would just be hard to go home and look at my kids. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it's all for something bigger, like at the end of my life, I'm going to have to stand before God and give an account of my life. Like, hey, Joe, I gave you this platform. What did you do with it? You're like, I was kind of a turd. Even with the kids, I always feel like sometimes I'll do an interview, like the shorter form ones that are like, 10 minutes. And I always sneak in something about my family or something. I feel like they get annoyed sometimes. Like, man, like I want them to look back and be like, okay, you were given a mic. What did you want to do with it? What did you want to talk about? Did you want to talk about how awesome you thought you were, which I really don't,
Right.
or what was important, So
That's
I don't think
pretty
guys
good
see
way.
that. But I know money is important too. So, but the other thing I got to look at is a lot of guys don't have a skill set after fighting, so they're like trying to cash in. I want to be able to have run the program at GMO and grow it, and look at my students in the face and have them be like, yeah, my coach did the right thing, and this isn't the be all end all. I love it, but and I feel like every time I make it the be all end all, it starts to take over my identity again. God's like, no, absolutely not. Like, there's sand on your head, buddy, or whatever it is, and for good reason, because there's way more to it. And it's just, dude, we see it. We were laughing. Me and Jeff were laughing the other day, like the guys at the fights that are like in their 50s trying to be tough and yell at other guys.
Dude.
Like, it's just crazy, man.
Like, done. I'm done with that.
There's so much more to beyond this, It's a small blip on the radar. So,
yeah, that's an awesome way to look at things, man. I swear, dude, like talking to Joe, it's almost like talking to, and I don't mean any offense by this, but it's almost talking to like a grandfather. God, the dude is wise beyond his years.
Yeah. He's 2 years, bro, and just aging like a dog, 7 years for one.
Well, so one more thing before we let you go. A lot of fighters have like nicknames, right? What do people call you in the gym? Because I know you don't officially have one.
Yeah, nothing really. I mean, and I might put it on the shirt this time because we're fighting back in Jersey, is Scott Holtzman, my manager and longtime teammate, and Jeff always call me Jersey Joe. And I've never used that, but I thought, I mean, I've always answered to it. But I've never really, done anything with that. But for this fight being in Jersey, I might be my walkout shirt. And I even thought about having Buffer announce it as that.
Dude,
but
that'd be cool.
That would be
Jersey Joe
cool.
Solecki. That would be sick.
You're in the history of some greats. You got Jersey Joe Walcott and some other ones. So maybe that is all I would ever settle for. That and Salter would always call me Overlooked. He'd be like, if you ever write a book, you need to call it Overlooked, because I do something and then like right back in the gym on Monday, and someone would be like, oh, do you ever fight? And you're like, I just fought in the UFC on Saturday. Like it just always goes under the radar. Anything I do, or I'd go compete somewhere, like beat somebody great, and no one would be there to know or whatever. Just like, I'm like, this is just my path. But he'd always be like, oh, there's old Overlooked again.
Oh man.
But yeah, I may very well use the Jersey Joe thing.
Dude,
I like that.
That would be sick.
That sounds good.
Jersey Joe Solecki.
Like you said with the old mind thing, is like, even though I feel like I got a long way left, like maybe like 8 years, 10 years, hopefully. But I'm starting to look at it all like these are last opportunities. You never know when the last one's going to be. So it's like, you look at it going, oh, maybe I'll have Bruce do that, but not this time. Not that you're like, well, eventually it's going to be the last time sometime.
For sure.
Like picking that walkout, whatever it is. Like I'm starting to try to do more stuff like that, smell the rose a little bit. So maybe this.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that'd be sick, man. I hope you do that.
I do too.
Well, listen, man, I'm super stoked that you took the time.
Appreciate it. It's been about an hour. So
thank you guys for having me. This has been great.
And you're in the middle of training camp, so we really appreciate you taking the time to jump on here with us, and we'd love to have you back again in the future.
Dude, anytime, absolutely.
On the bigger and better things, So Joe, appreciate you, man. You want to take us out, DK?
Yeah, man, Joe. Good luck coming up this UFC fight. For everybody else out there, please like, comment, subscribe, share. Let's get this episode out there. Let's get Joe's name out there even more than it already is. So this guy told me his dreams a long time ago, and I really believe him. And I look forward to see him come to fruition. So make sure you guys give him a follow.
Yeah, man. What DK said. Appreciate you, Joe. Always good talking to you, brother.
Yep.
Super humble guy. Like sometimes it's just like it seems unreal like how humble Joe is.
Once you've been slammed on TV and told to kill yourself, it changes the man, bro. You got to humble yourself. Thank you, guys. This has been great. Seriously, anytime.
All right, man.
This was great.
Appreciate you, man. Until next time.